super stoked to talk to you today about hiking to Emerald Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. Before we get started, I would like you to take the subscribe button on a hike with you, but instead of packing hiking snacks, pack dog treats. And when they complain about the lack of snacks, ask them to sit for a treat. I am a local Colorado hiker. You can find me at foxintheforest.net, where I write about hiking and adventuring in Colorado, the American Southwest, and Lake Tahoe. One last quick thing before we get started here. The photos you're going to see today are mostly taken by me. However, since I am here at a time that's typically inopportune for photography and I'm on the move since I'm climbing, I have included a few amazing stock photos so that you can get a sense of what the area looks like if you're a photographer. Emerald Lake is one of the busiest hikes in the country. Yes, you heard that correctly, the country. Rocky Mountain National Park sees one of the highest visitor volumes out of all national parks in the US every year, and this is the most popular trail here. When I hike this trail, I am climbing the mountains in the back. So I've actually done this hike at least 10 times, and every single time I do it, it's usually just a handful of people there. So I'm gonna teach you the ins and outs on how to make that happen for your hike. So you're gonna wanna stay tuned because I'm gonna be putting juicy secrets out throughout this entire video. The Emerald Lake hike is 3.2 miles with 702 feet of gain. Now in Colorado, that is generally considered a pretty easy hike, although a lot of out-of-towners may find themselves a little breathless since the elevation is pretty high. However, everything is super well marked and very well maintained. This trail will bypass 3 lakes along the way. There's Bear Lake, which is where you start, Nymph Lake, which is this tiny little dream-like wonderland, and then Dream Lake, which is super famous for photography, and then from there you'll make your way up to Emerald Lake. The first thing we're going to talk about before we dive into the hike is going to be parking. In order to visit Rocky Mountain National Park during certain times of the day, you need a timed entry permit throughout the year. The only times of year you don't need a timed entry permit is from the beginning of November through Memorial Day. However, there is a separate permit for driving on the Bear Lake Corridor Road, and you will be parking at the Bear Lake Trailhead, so you will need said permit only if you're visiting from the hours of 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Now, the important thing to know is that just because you have a timed entry permit, you are not guaranteed parking. The rangers absolutely patrol this lot, and parking will fill up on weekends by about 4:30, 4:45 if you're lucky on the weekends. And during the week, I expect that parking lot to be full by the 5 a.m. start. This kind of sounds silly because it seems like your permit really isn't good for that much. It's basically a lottery to see if you can get parking. However, if you want solitude on this hike, you're gonna wanna be at the trailhead by 4:30 anyway. And here is why. The number one way to get some sense of solitude on this hike is to plan to be at the lake for sunrise. Now, if you are not an early riser, this can sound like a god-awful task. However, it is an absolute bucket list activity if you've never done this before. In Colorado, it is very common for us to start hikes at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., so it's very run-of-the-mill for us locals. But if you're visiting from out of town, I really encourage you to plan on being at Emerald Lake by sunrise. Not only is it something you will never forget, but the chances of you having solitude at the lake are relatively high. There's usually a few people. A lot of people photograph Dream Lake for sunrise. You may have a few people hanging out by the lake shore for sunrise, and you'll obviously see some climbers if it's a good day for climbing. But if you really want to see this lake and really want to experience it in a way that isn't with hundreds and hundreds of people, this is absolutely the way to go. So how do you make this happen? All right, I'm gonna let you in on a hiker's secret. It takes the average hiker 30 minutes per mile or 1 hour per 1,000 feet of gain, whichever is longer. So what does that mean? That means that you will be hiking at a pace of either 2 miles an hour or 1 hour per 1,000 feet of gain. So when we look at this 3.2 mile hike, we can say that's 1.6 miles one way, right? So that means it's gonna take us roughly 45 minutes, or if you're new to mountain hiking, you could even budget an hour to get to the lake. And if we look at that 702 feet of gain, again, it's roughly 45 minutes. So in this particular case, you wanna leave at least 45 minutes before sunrise. If you're not a big time hiker or you're new to hiking at altitude, then I would give yourself an hour before sunrise. So that means you're gonna wanna look at sunrise, simply Google it, and then leave an hour before that. If you find that that time is within the reservation allotment and doesn't get you to the trailhead by 4:30, then plan at arriving at the trailhead at 4:30. So for the climbs that I do off of the Emerald Lake Trail, I really don't need to be up that early. In fact, it's a little bit of a hindrance for me. So what I typically like to do is I'll show up at the trailhead by 4:30, 4:45 at the absolute latest, and I'll sit in my car and have a snack, listen to a podcast, maybe do some stretching or whatever you want to do until it's time to leave. Now, if you are the kind of person who really doesn't want to miss a moment at all, you can absolutely start your hike, and you will be doing so mostly by headlamp, depending on the phase of the moon, and get to the lake a little bit early and have a lot of time to have a good view, set up a tripod, pack a picnic breakfast. I mean, we brought champagne up there once, so you can really do whatever you want up there, but that is how you're gonna time your hike, right? Well, you're gonna see a lot of people stopped at Dream Lake. I highly, highly recommend continuing onwards to Emerald Lake because there's even fewer people there. There are always people at Dream Lake. So you can watch the sunrise up at Emerald Lake and then hike back down to Dream Lake, take a break, and take in the scenery there as well. Other things you can do if you're feeling up for it, you can hike all the way up to Lake Hayaha because you're partway there. You're just gonna continue on the sign trail towards Lake Hayaha once you reach Dream Lake. Now, if a sunrise hike definitely isn't in your repertoire, I do wanna give you fair warning that literally hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people visit this viewpoint every day. So you will be hiking with a ton of people. You will most certainly need to take the shuttle bus to get to the trailhead, and there can be hundreds of people sitting on the lakeshore of Emerald Lake. Now, for some of you that may not be a huge deal, but for those of you that really want solitude, sunrise is really the best way. Visiting during the week obviously lessens your chances, but during the week, during the day, in the summer at Rocky Mountain, still super duper crowded. So just keep that in mind. However, if you are hiking in the afternoon, remember that July, August, and parts of June, there are monsoon storms that roll through Colorado every day. It's almost a guarantee that sometime between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. there will be a violent thunderstorm, and this trail does head a touch above tree line, so just make sure you're paying attention when you're hiking. Bring stuff for all sorts of weather and bring stuff for rain, and try to stay below tree line if there are thunderstorms. You probably don't want to hike in the thunderstorms as it's actually quite intense and pretty scary, and all the views get socked in with clouds as well. If you're looking for what to bring on this hike, check out the details down below. I've got a complete packing list for you. Another great thing about starting at sunrise is it puts you one step ahead of all the tour buses and tours going up to Trail Ridge Road. So if your ultimate goal is to check out Trail Ridge Road, if it's open, and it's typically open late spring, early summer into late fall, definitely be sure to do that after your hike, since you'll be one step ahead of the crowds there and one step ahead of the crowds all day, which is awesome if you're spending the day in Rocky Mountain National Park. I have a ton of resources on Rocky Mountain National Park, so certainly be sure to check out the show notes down below. And remember that I am your local Colorado hiking expert. I cover the American Southwest, Lake Tahoe, and Colorado extensively over at my blog, foxintheforest.net, so be sure to check that out. And as always, if you like this video, please subscribe. And if you've been to Dream Lake and you want to share your experience, I always want to hear your stories, so be sure to comment down below. All right, happy hiking.